Hey everybody, Arnaldo here, broadcasting from Fidelius Frequency. Welcome to my channel. There is a common video that is going around the YouTube vinyl community. It was actually a video that was posted by Chris, and the name of his channel is The Long Cut. I have a link to that video in the description of this one. Well, I don't know, I don't think he started it and decided to make it like a challenge or a tag, a vinyl tag, but it seems to have evolved that way, where many members have started posting similar videos in the spirit of the initial video that Chris posted. And I'm talking about the 10 records that you listen to the most. Spirit of the video is not necessarily to talk about your 10 favorite records, but the records that you happen for one reason or another to be listening to more often than others. So I thought I'd give this one a go. It seems like a fun challenge or a fun idea for a video. So I guess I'll present them in a chronological order, starting with an album from the 60s. An album from my favorite band. And this actually probably happens to be, I want to say right now. I say right now because I've debated, gone back and forth at times throughout, my life and my music journey. I've alternated between different albums, favorite albums of this group, but I think I've kind of settled on this one. And of course, I'm talking about the Beatles, and I am talking about Revolver. A lot has been said about Revolver. I'm not going to describe it more in detail, other than the reasons why I listen to it the most. It all comes down to, yes, I do have an appreciation for the moment in the career of the Beatles when this album came out. They started focusing more on studio work. And you can tell there's a bit more experimentation in the studio. They were thinking outside of the box. They were pushing the boundaries, pushing George Martin and their engineer. I believe this one was engineered by Jeff Emmerich. But it's not only because of that. And actually, this is the kind of like the precursor to the even more experimentation that happened with Sgt. Pepper. But mainly because of the music, because of the songs. Starting off with Taxman, probably one of my favorite George Harrison songs of the Beatles era. One of Paul McCartney's best ballads or love songs, and maybe probably one of his best songs altogether is on this album, and that is Here, There, and Everywhere. Another great Paul McCartney tune on this album is Got to Get You Into My Life. And of course, then you have these stellar contributions from John Lennon, The Closer, Tomorrow Never Knows, Dr. Robert. Basically, it comes down to the songs. Yeah, the sound is very important. I love the sound of the Beatles at this point in time in 1966. So yeah, right now, this is my favorite Beatle album and one of the albums that I listen to the most. Moving on to another album. This one was from the 70s, and it almost was not released because the head of the label at the time thought it was too much of a departure. And I'm talking about Marvin Gaye's What's Going On. I said it was a departure because this album was so different, lyrically speaking, from what Marvin Gaye was writing about up until this point in his career. A lot of social commentary, namely the title track, What's Going On. Commentary about, the war in Vietnam as well. The ecology, climate change in Mercy, Mercy Me, the ecology. I don't know what else to say about this. Sung beautifully. For me, Marvin Gaye is he's one of my favorite vocalists. Almost like he can have an angelic tone and also a very sexy tone, which you will see in his later career with Let's Get It On. But this album, from start to finish, just flows so well. This is one of those albums that you just put on and you just play the entire thing because some songs segue one into the other, namely mostly the first side. But beautifully played, beautifully sung, and great songs on here. My next selection is from the 80s, and this record changed the way I listened to music. After I bought this record, I don't think I listened to music. I had a different appreciation for music. I was listening to the sounds, the musicianship, the production in records, and it all changed for me when Avalon by Roxy Music came out. And initially I heard this, the main single, which was More Than This, on the radio. Second single, I think, was The Main Thing. And then there's also Avalon. This is their last album, the album that most people who are not fans of Roxy Music will always go to. It's probably their most successful album commercially. What can I say? Brian Ferry, he's a very underrated lyricist, I think, and songwriter. The musicianship on here, the production, this is just a classy record. I typically love to enjoy this in the evening, and I've been spinning it since it came out in 1984, I believe, right? Actually 1982, sorry. I was just probably in my first year of high school when this came out. And Roxy Music, Avalon, probably, if you haven't listened to this record, you definitely should. Another one of my favorite bands from the 80s, probably the best band out of the 80s. I currently have a series going on my channel about them. That's how big a fan I am of them, and I'm talking about the Smiths. And obvious choice, not only is this my favorite album by the Smiths, not only is this one of my favorite albums, period, it had to be one of the albums also that I listen to the most. And I'm talking about The Queen Is Dead. Some will argue about Hatful of Hollow being their best album. Some may like the last album that they did, Strange Ways, and I think Marzi and Mar both concur that that is their finest hour. But really, I have to say that The Queen Is Dead, for me, is their masterpiece. I mean, it has songs like, apart from the title track, The Queen Is Dead, it has The Boy with a Thorn in His Side, Big Mouth Strikes Again, There Is a Light That Never Goes Out, Cemetery Gates. I mean, I can go on, and if you know the Smiths, you probably know The Queen Is Dead. If you don't know the Smiths, you probably have heard of The Queen Is Dead, and you should investigate it. And more 80s. Yeah, I'm an 80s guy. I still think the 80s had a better musical output than the 90s, but that's just my opinion. And I'm sure there'll be a lot of comments about 90s music. When this album came out, I bought it based on the hype, at the time I was reading a lot of the British music press, all hailed, like critically acclaimed, this album by the Pixies called Doolittle. This is the 25th anniversary edition. At the time I bought it on CD. Some of you will recognize probably this type of artwork, which is kind of reminiscent of the original album cover. The monkey on it and the halo. Doolittle, when I bought it, I wasn't really sure I liked it. After the first spin, I thought maybe I don't get this kind of music. I gave it 3 listens, and after that, I was hooked. Not a very long album, but it is perfect. Kind of like a tour de force, starting off with the crazy Debaser, Monkey Gone to Heaven, Here Comes Your Man, Mr. Greaves, and the final song, Gouge Away. This version, the 25th anniversary edition, comes with a second album of B-sides and demos and outtakes. And I still find myself spinning it, and I'm glad I didn't sell off my CD at the time, and I gave it a couple more spins. Still am in search of an original UK 4AD version, which has become quite pricey lately, but definitely worth the money. And at some point I will pull the trigger on a first press. And last record from the 90s. I won't talk too much about this album. I actually made a video about this album. It was the inaugural video of my channel, my very first video, and I'm talking about the Blue Nile and Hats. I talk about in that video how good this album is, why I listen to it so much. I still find myself listening to it. It's just, for me, their best album, one of my all-time favorite albums. A band that doesn't get as much praise as they should, and maybe this will be the opportunity for someone else who's not a fan to investigate their music. So check out my other video, or just listen to this album by the Blue Nile called Hats. And now let's move into the 90s. Along with the Smiths and the Beatles, another one of my favorite bands is r.e.m. And in 1991, they released my favorite album of theirs, probably my favorite album of the 90s, and I'm talking about Automatic for the People. And yeah, the song on here that got the most airplay was Everybody Hurts. The video had, it was basically filmed, I think, on an LA freeway where the traffic had stopped. I don't think it's explained why it was stopped, but at one point, I don't think any of the, except for Michael Stipe, I don't think any of the other band members are in this video, and it's basically random people parked in their cars. And at the end of the video, they all just leave their cars and start walking. So very memorable video, even more so. Song, Drive is on here. Night Swimming, Find the River, Man on the Moon. I can go on and on. This is a haunting album, in my opinion. Probably not their most rock-oriented album, but this still remains an album that I spin to this very day. Another album from the 90s. This one is, this invented a genre. I'm talking about Dummy by Portishead. When I first heard this record, I was actually at a friend's record store, and it had just come in on CD. He was playing it, and I was like, what is this, and who are they? I need to get this. And many years later, of course, I bought the vinyl as well. I call it the blueprint of trip hop. I think kind of like ushered in the era of retro samples in that genre. 70s or R&B samples abound in here. And Portishead have only made 3 records, all very unique. For me, they're all perfect, but this one is the one that I always go to. And the songs on here, Sour Times, Glory Box, and one of my favorites is Roads. Actually, Roads is probably the one that's been featured in a lot of very, let's call it intense movie scenes as, you know, as background music. So check it out, Portishead, Dummy. And now to probably my favorite band from the 90s, I think is Radiohead, and their album OK Computer is my favorite album of theirs. The first, I don't know if you could call it first side, because at the time I bought it on CD, but the first 6 songs on here, starting off with Airbag, Paranoid Android, Subterranean, Homesick Alien, Exit Music, and Letdown. And then there's Karma Police. I don't know how you can stop playing this record after those first 6 songs. What can I say? Who doesn't know Radiohead? So some think they're overrated. I don't think so at all. I don't think they produced any bad record. Maybe their first was a bit, they were still finding their footing. But after that, from the Bends onwards, I mean, can't say more than I just love Radiohead. And yeah, I keep spinning this all the time. Final selection, number 10. Only album from the 2000s. I resisted liking this artist. I didn't want to jump on the bandwagon at the very beginning of her career. Videotape came out. I thought, maybe this is a one-hit wonder. I don't fully get her. And then Ultraviolence came out and it piqued my interest. But when this album came out, I was all in, and I have been ever since. I'm talking about Lana Del Rey and Honeymoon. Here's one example that I have to say, this is the first album that I loved about Lana Del Rey, of course. NFR, Norman Bleep Rockwell is probably my favorite album of hers. But this is the album that I always listen to. I often go down on a road trip down to Key West from Miami, and this is always playing in the car for part of the trip. It's a pretty long trip, but the first 50 minutes of the trip, or the middle 50 minutes of the trip, are always Honeymoon by Lana Del Rey. I don't know, it just fits perfectly. There's no specific period of the year or time of day that I like to listen to this album. It's probably an evergreen for me. I'll listen to it at any time. Whereas the previous albums, I have to be in a certain mood or a certain time of day or season of the year where I'll play that album more often than others. This one is just like, anytime is good to listen to Honeymoon. It's got, the video of this one, High by the Beach. It's a classic. Lana Del Rey in her, I don't know if it's a Malibu home. She's obviously some kind of star, movie star, and she's hounded by the press. I won't tell you the end of the video if you haven't seen the video, not to spoil it. But that's High by the Beach. Honeymoon, music to watch boys to, The Blackest Day, Art Deco. I could go on and on naming all these songs, but love me some Lana Del Rey. And here's the bonus. A lot of members, YouTube members, VC members have been posting a bonus record on top of the 10. I have my 11th pick. And this is a band that in the US doesn't get as much praise as they should. I'm talking about the band Suede and their masterpiece, the one and only Dogman Star. This is the last album with Bernard Butler. He was the main songwriter along with Brett Anderson. They were co-writers of all of their songs up until then. This is where they distanced themselves from Britpop. Their first album was more rock and in the vein of Britpop, like maybe Blur, Oasis, Pulp. Very English, not as English as Pulp, but definitely inspired by David Bowie. Not so much the glam David Bowie, which was probably the following album coming up. This one has beautiful orchestration. The last track is almost like a full-blown, it's just basically Brett singing with an orchestra. The second to last song is almost prog. It's called The Asphalt World. And throughout, there's like so many songs. It's a very serious, dark, also another very haunting album. As you can see, I love haunting albums. And yeah, this is another classic of mine, and I love to spin this. So that's it. 10 plus 1 bonus. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Show me your feedback. Leave some comments. And thank you, Chris, from The Long Cut, for inspiring me to do one of these videos as well. I guess I will see you on the next video, and if you get a chance, subscribe to my channel and you'll be notified of upcoming videos. Thank you so much. Bye.